Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little big, whatever the heck size it is, guy right here. This is the Lionsteel SR11. Well, actually, heck, let's just jump into it. This is, we'll do a size comparison here. First off, Ontario Rat number 2 and your Ontario Rat number 1. So you can see that size-wise, this is not a small knife. And in fact, in terms of blade length, effective use, and actually blade profile, the Rat 1 isn't far off in terms of that. Although blade thickness, the SR is way higher. Right here is, of course, your Spyderco Delica and your Spyderco PM2. So there you go, and yeah, I think that'll do it for size comparison at the moment. This is an interesting knife in that this is a relatively, well, it is a newer release from Lionsteel, and it is an update in a lot of ways of one of their older knives, the SR1. The SR1 and SR2, which was the smaller version, which never made any sense to me, but whatever, was much like this guy, an integral-handled knife, except it was running using thumb studs and had Teflon washers instead of bearings. And so this is a very much an update of that guy. And so it's something I've been very excited to see. And I was even more so excited after this little guy won the 2017 Overall Knife of the Year out of the Blade Show. So this is an award-winning knife right here, and Lionsteel actually won a Manufacturing Quality Award this year too. So whatever it is, there you go. And that's why I picked one up for the channel, and that's why I'm about to do the full good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little Italian knife. Let's go. So on the good side, first off, ding dong, the Teflon's dead. One of the biggest issues that the SR1 and SR2 had was that they were running on Teflon washers. And in addition to giving that a Teflon action, which for me isn't a great thing, it also made the knives a royal pain in the neck to reassemble because you're having to shove Teflon washers into an integral handle. Total pain in the neck. Terrible thing. Watch my SR2 review for a little bit of a play-by-play on that one. But anyways, I'm really glad to hear that they've moved to bearings on this knife, not only for the action, but because I think it's, well, makes the knife better. Teflon sucks, at least in my opinion, so there you go. Next thing I gotta say that I like about this knife is the roto lock. This little guy right here. This is a way, all you need to do to use this is you rotate this little disc, like so, and then now this lock bar cannot come unlocked. It has put a physical blockage in its place, so this is a lot more fixed bladey than it previously was, and, well, I appreciate that. It's not something that I really need very often, but, you know, it's a neat little feature, and it's not obtrusive, it's not problematic, it's not going to accidentally get stuck open or closed, so, you know, I can't argue. Nice. Next thing, I do gotta say, although the clip bothers me in a couple of ways, the fact that it is reversible without an extra hole is very nice. If you want to reverse this clip for left side carry, all you do is you use the included wrench to spin this little guy right here around. That'll loosen this screw up a little bit, and that'll let you lift this up and then flip it over to the other side, and then there you go. Problem solved. And at that point, it's a lefty-sided knife, although it's still a frame lock, so it's still more righty-friendly, but still, it's a nice approach, and it's a way to get left-hand clips without ugly holes that they needed to put in there. So that's good. Next thing, I gotta say, there are elements of this blade that I love. For instance, this swedge on this blade is just beautiful. For whatever reason, this almost spear-pointy nature of this blade, coupled with this swedge, I just freaking love the looks of this blade. And on the blade, the steel itself is fine. It's using Sleipner steel, which is solid steel, no real complaints with it there. And the sharpening choil on it is also very good. You can see here that the grind has reached its full thickness by the time the choil ends. Nice. Can't argue with that at all. So the blade's very nice. And speaking of that blade swedge, I actually find this knife on the whole very beautiful. Very attractive. Not only because of the blade, but even the handle is very nice. The proportioning of the knife is, I just love the looks of this. This is a very pretty knife to me, 100%. Even the way that they did the flipper tab is attractive and nice. So, aesthetically speaking, it's very cool. You can also see that the texturing on the handle is very pretty looking. You get like a diamond pattern in the center there, and then you get these little stripes here, and then in the back you get the speed holes on the handle. It's a pretty knife overall. Can't really argue with that whatsoever. Next thing, I gotta say, I like the fact that this is an integral knife. I've been loving integrals lately, and this is a good one. The thing to love about an integral is the simplicity to it. It's not simple to make, mind you, but they are very simple to maintain. This knife, well, we'll get back to that one later on, but even still, all you really need to do to disassemble this knife is to slightly loosen this and then unscrew the pivot, pop it through, and then pull the blade out. So this was a 10-minute take-apart knife, and I appreciate that very, very much. You also get a feeling of solidity with an integral knife that's could be entirely made up and in my mind, but by God, it's something I appreciate. So that's a very nice thing. And then finally, I got a comment. The fit and finish on this guy is great. I can tell why Lionsteel won the Manufacturing Quality Award if they're doing stuff like this, because frankly, there are no fit and finish fouls on this knife at all. Everything that they have done here, they've done very, very well. Actually, well, we'll talk about the clip in a little bit there, but nonetheless, everything, by and large, they have done very, very well here. This is well built as a knife. I like very much that. Don't agree with all the choices, but I like the construction, the implementation. So to me, that's what's good here. It's got very good fit and finish. It's an integral knife. It's a beautiful knife with beautiful texturing, a beautiful blade. It's got a reversible clip that doesn't need a hole on this side. It's got the roto lock feature, so it's kind of a fixed blade if you need one. Although you should probably just use a fixed blade. And then finally, ding dong, the Teflon is dead, and that's just a beautiful thing. Let's talk about what's great about this knife. To me, what's great about this knife 100% is the action. This is a flipper knife running on bearings, and it's a beautiful flipper running on beautiful bearings. It feels great to use. The detent is dialed in nicely. It's 100% reliable to open in any position, any size. It's good to go there. Except when I slip off the flipper tab, because it's inadequately textured. Hey, I wonder where we're going to talk about that. Maybe later. I don't know. But anyways, moving on. The other thing is that the closure is very nice. It's not completely drop shotty. I suspect it'll wear in over time, but it is still a very, very smooth action overall. And then I gotta say, the sound on it is pretty great. That's one of those completely absurd things that knife guys love and no one else understands, but the sound of this knife opening is pretty spectacular. And so I got to comment on the action here, because the action is 100% the greatest part of this knife. Let's talk about what's bad. So on the bad side, first off, unfortunately, disassembly of this knife is a little bit more painful than in most integral knives. And the reason I say that is, you know, in a lot of integrals, all you really have in there are the blade and then the bearings inside the blade. And so you take the pivot out and pull the blade out, and then to reinsert it, you just put the bearings inside the blade, slide it back in. It's easy, it's fun, it's straightforward. On this guy, there is an extra complication, which is a pair of stainless steel washers against the aluminum here. I understand that they need those washers so that the bearings don't wear a hole in the aluminum, etc. But the problem is that those washers are floating on top of the bearings, but not inside the cutout for the blade, and not inside the handle either. And so you're trying to kind of force those washers in there, well, wedging this open. It's an ugly process relative to most integrals. It's still better than the SR2, which was a circle of hell to disassemble, but I'm still not a huge fan of it. So that's something to keep in mind. Next thing, this is using a convex grind. I'm listing this early in the bad because it's not going to be bad for everybody, but what that means is that instead of being a V-shape edge like on most knives, you have a rounded off edge, kind of like this. I'm not saying it's not sharp, and in fact, this is going to be a stronger edge. It'll be a little more durable for you in the long run, but unfortunately, if you're using a guided sharpening system like a KME, Edge Pro, Wicked Edge, Lansky, etc., you're not going to get it's going to be a bit of a pain to maintain a convex edge. You can do it with a mouse pad and some sandpaper. It's not a total loss, but that is something you're going to want to keep in mind. This is convex, and not everyone loves convex. Next thing. The ergonomics on this knife are honestly just not good. You have a very proud clip here. It's sticking up a fair amount and digs into your finger back here. The lock bar on this guy is very high relative to the other side here, which means that that's really digging into my finger here in a way that I'm not super in love with. Similarly, I just don't feel like my hand fits on this knife particularly well. I have smaller hands than most. Maybe a bigger hand would have less of a problem with this guy. But honestly, ergonomically, I don't like this knife. It's not terrible. It's not I'm grabbing a bag of freaking hornets or anything. But it's just not a knife that feels good in my hand. And so that is bad for me, 100%. And maybe a reason to check this guy out in your hand first. Next thing, the lanyard hole on this guy is absolutely a miss. What I mean by that is, look, the lanyard hole is going all the way through the metal here. And that makes sense because the blade is really only going down to about here. So this entire area here exists only to support this damn lanyard hole. And the problem is that area is an ergonomic issue. Had this knife just been rounded off to the end there, I think this would have been a much more, would have been a much nicer knife in the hand. And so having that extra area there for the lanyard hole, ugly. Not a big fan of that whatsoever. Lanyard holes are not something I'm in love with, generally speaking, but this one particularly is why we can't have nice things. So that's terrible. Next thing, you can see on the top here that there is a glass breaker on the back of this. Now, I'm not saying that having a glass breaker per se is a bad thing, but this positioning was very annoying to me, and also the sharpness of it. And again, a carbide tip glass breaker needs to be sharp. But every damn time I was reaching into my pocket for something, I found myself scratching up my hands on the end of this glass breaker, and it's not a fun thing to have on there. It's just a random sharp tip that probably is never going to be useful for you. I mean, maybe if you're a first responder type, in a worst case scenario, it might, but in a worst case scenario, you're going into water, and then you got a whole different set of issues. We'll talk about that in a bit here. But nonetheless, I don't like the positioning of that guy, and I don't like the sharpness of it. Then finally, on the bad side, if you watch my live unboxing video, you'll see that when I first got this knife out of the pocket, the clip was actually sitting way up here. I mean, the clip was positioned about this far off of the handle. And that's not great because it meant that the knife was basically just held into my pocket by gravity, which is not a very secure way to go for it. And unfortunately, the clip itself is just not very bendy at all. It's just overly thick, and so it just doesn't work well. But I suspect that I readjusted it, and I showed you how in that live stream, where you just flip the clip around, tighten this down, and then use the knife itself as leverage, so to speak. But if you tighten it too much, you can't get it into your pocket and out of your pocket. And if you have it so that you can, there's really not enough tension. It's a badly designed clip, and it was badly adjusted from the factory. But I suspect it's hiding another issue, that this knife is kind of hard to remove from the pocket. And actually, we'll talk about that in the ugly, so let's go there. But on the bad side first, the clip was adjusted badly from the factory, and isn't a very good clip in terms of springiness. The freaking glass breaker is scratching at me all the time. The lanyard hole shouldn't be here and is kind of a mess. The ergos just aren't that great on it. The convex grind is not stellar, at least for me, as a V-grind sort of guy, and they've made disassembly a little bit of a pain relative to most integrals. But let's talk about what's ugly here. Look, two ugly issues with this knife. The first of which is that this knife is really, 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 really slippery. Now, let me clarify here. There are knives out there in the world that are absolutely fine in everyday use, but if you get them a little bit wet or you get them a little bit oily, they become a little bit slippery. That's not a great thing. This knife, though, is always freaking slippery. You don't need to, your hands don't need to be wet. You don't need to have oil around. Heck, you could be in the middle of the Sahara, dying of freaking thirst, with no moisture around. You could be on Tata freaking Ween from Star Wars, and you could be still slipping on this knife. I mean, no freaking sand people fighting over water springs, and this knife is still going to slip out of your hand as you're trying to chase off the sand people. Ugly, 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 ugly. And, they've tried to texture it here, but this texturing is more for the eye than it is for the hand. And all these curves are very gradual and provide nice ramps. Heck, it's a beautiful thing that this flipper tab is hooked, because that's the only damn thing keeping you from sliding up onto the blade. Look, I often will rail against knives for not having way crazy amounts of texture here, but guys, come on. There's no jimping. There's not a damn thing on here. Even the flipper tab is untextured, and you saw me sliding off of that guy. This is just really, really, really ugly in the slippery department, and that has another unintended consequence, which is that because this is a deep carry clip, and the clip is too damn stiff, when you try and pull this out of your pocket, the only surface you can really do, you can grab it like this, but on one side you're on this crowned blade, which, by the way, could have been good. Rounding is nice, but you're on this smooth crown blade on one side, and you're on this smooth surface on the other side, and so more often than not, I'd try and pull this knife out, and because this damn clip is too tight, I'd pull it off, and terrible. And so more often than not, I found myself like pressing the fabric in underneath the knife and kind of lifting it out that way, so I could get past the damn clip. This knife, see, just did it again. This knife is just too damn slippery. Needs a visit from the texturing fairy stat. So that's the first ugly issue. The other ugly issue is that it is just too damn thick behind the edge. I mean, seriously, look at the back of that sharpening choil here to see just how thick this guy actually is. It really, really balloons out to a thickness very, very quickly. So this means this is not a great knife for instance, cutting up an apple. Instead, you're going to pop the apple open. Or in cutting paper, cutting thick, hard cell foam, that kind of thing. This is not a great knife for it. I mean, it's a good blade shape if you're planning on bushcrafting with it, but it's on bearings. What are you doing? So anyways, and it's not enough extra to hold it for bushcrafting. So that, to me, is the other ugly issue, is that it's not a great slicer because it's just too damn thick behind the edge. And on a knife with a grind as tall as this one, that was a real supreme disappointment. This could be a great cutting machine, but instead, I just don't get it. So to me, that's the uglies. It's super thick behind the edge, and it is so damn slippery. So anyways, let's go into the final verdict here. Look, for me, my experience with this knife has been kind of like a surprisingly bad first date. I think we've all had this experience where, like, you do an online thing. You see pictures and everything looks great. There's attraction, no problem there. You look at things on paper, like, okay, good job, good education. This is gonna be great. You see him across the parking lot, like, bam, I am super interested. This is gonna be a great date. Then you sit down across the table and you start talking, and within 15 minutes you realize that everything is just subtly wrong. And it's not like your date showed up in a Nazi uniform or ordered cooked puppy or something. It's the little details. You know, like super loud chewing or something like that. Or you notice a Z-hunter hanging out in their pocket or something like that. They're asking subtle but highly interested questions about the suppleness of your internal organs. Those kinds of questions are the ones that are details, but they're absolutely, well, disconcerting. And these details may not be on the profile, but when you add it all up, after those 15 minutes of talking, it's wrong enough that there's just no question at all. There will be no second date. No thanks, I am not staying for dessert. Instead, you're just looking to bail. Maybe they'll be great for somebody else, but they are absolutely not for you. And that's me with this knife. Because in pictures and on paper, I was ready for love at first sight, because this is a beautiful blade. Beautiful handle design. It is an integral knife. It's a flipper with a great action. It's got the roto-lock thing. It's got a folding, beefy blade, which can be a wonderful thing. They finally ditched the Teflon. Heck, it was Blade of the Year from Blade Show. And so I was super excited for this date, and I wore my best undies, so to speak. But the thing is, once it showed up, pretty rapidly, heck, even during my live unboxing video, I started realizing that there was not going to be a second date here because the details were subtly wrong. There was nothing like a big problem here, but all the little subtle things added up to a big problem. Ergonomically, it's just not working for me. Convex edges are just not my shtick. It's built like a hard-use knife, but it's running on bearings. That doesn't really make sense. If they'd done it on phosphor bronze, then the whole hard-use edge, maybe, but that doesn't work. And then it's crazy freaking slippery, to the point where it was really annoying on a regular basis, and it's so thick behind the edge that it's just not a great cutting tool. And so the end result of all of these subtle things is a knife that could easily look like the Blade of the Year from across the room, but with these subtle issues, once you get it in hand and spend some time, it is a definite nope for me. I am not staying for dessert. I am not setting up something for next week, and I am sure as heck not putting out for this guy. I am just moving on with my life. My hope is that there will be an SR12 that fixes these issues, that they'll make some substantial ergonomic tweaks. They'll add some actual texturing someplace, making this knife a lot less slippery. Maybe they'll grind it to actually cut things, because I think this knife is startlingly close to being startlingly good. This could be an incredible date. But for now, well, this was a lot of fun. I mean, it was great to meet you, SR11. I mean, seriously, you are one heck of a knife. But, you know, I think our lives are just on two very different paths. You want something different out of life than I do. It's not you, of course. It's me. But I got to work early tomorrow, and I got a long drive back home. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and skip dessert and, well, have yourself an absolutely wonderful rest of your day there, SR11. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting to you. Who knows, maybe it'll be a Blade of the Year for you, but no, thank you for me. Hope this has been interesting. Have yourselves a wonderful one. Bye now.